The smell of smoke still haunted her dreams. 3 months had passed since the fire, but Maya Chen would wake up gasping for air, her hands reaching out to save paintings that were now nothing but ashes. That night had taken everything: her art, her money, her confidence, and her place in the New York art world. Standing on the porch of her rented cottage, Maya took a deep breath of salty air. The small coastal town of Pine Harbor looked nothing like the busy streets of New York she had left behind. Here, the loudest sound was the crash of waves against the rocky shore below. The cottage itself was nothing special: peeling paint, creaky floorboards, and windows that rattled when the wind blew hard. But the view was worth every penny of her dwindling savings. "You settling in okay?" called a voice from the road. Mrs. Patel from the local grocery store was walking by with her dog. The older woman had been one of the few locals who didn't treat Maya like an outsider. Getting there, Maya replied with a small wave. She wasn't ready to tell anyone that she had only unpacked one suitcase in the 3 weeks she'd been here. The rest of her meager belongings sat in boxes, as if waiting for her to admit this move was permanent. Later that morning, Maya walked to the Sun and Moon Cafe, where she had picked up shifts serving breakfast and lunch. The owner, a woman everyone called Sunny, had hired her without asking too many questions. "Table 6 needs more coffee," Sunny said as Maya tied on her apron. "And there's a guy at the counter who's been asking about local artists. Thought you might know something." Maya froze. "I don't know any artists here." Sunny raised an eyebrow but didn't push. She had noticed Maya's hands, the calluses and paint stains that never quite washed away, but respected her privacy. For 6 hours, Maya carried plates of pancakes and refilled coffee cups. Her feet ached and her back hurt, but there was something comforting about the simple work. No one expected brilliance here. No one watched her every move. No critics waited to tear apart everything she created. When her shift ended, Maya grabbed her old backpack containing a sketchbook and a small box of charcoals. She hadn't touched proper paint since the fire. The thought of color still made her hands shake. She hiked to a small cliff overlooking the ocean. The late afternoon sun turned the water into sheets of gold. Maya sat on a flat rock and opened her sketchbook to a blank page. For several minutes, she just watched the waves, feeling the tension slowly leave her shoulders. Her first strokes were hesitant, just rough lines capturing the horizon. Then the charcoal moved more freely across the paper as she sketched the jagged rocks, the curling waves, the single seagull circling above. It wasn't much, just a simple landscape, but it was the first time in months that drawing felt like breathing rather than drowning. "That's really good." Maya's hand jerked, leaving a dark streak across the page. A boy about 10 years old stood nearby, watching her with curious eyes. "Sorry," he said, seeing her startled expression. "My mom says I need to stop sneaking up on people." Maya found herself smiling despite her surprise. "It's okay, I was just lost in thought." The boy, who introduced himself as Liam, sat down nearby and asked if he could watch her draw. Something about his honest interest soothed her nerves. For the next hour, Maya sketched while Liam asked questions about how she made the waves look like they were moving and why she used small, quick strokes for the foam on the rocks. When the sun began to set, Liam reluctantly said he needed to head home. Before leaving, he looked at her with serious eyes and said, "You should be doing this all the time. You make the ocean look even better than it really is." That night, Maya sat on her porch watching stars appear above the darkening water. Liam's innocent praise echoed in her mind. She had forgotten what it felt like to create art without the weight of expectations, her own or others. In New York, each piece had been analyzed, priced, and judged before the paint was even dry. She opened her laptop and stared at her nearly empty bank account. At this rate, she had maybe 2 more months before she'd need to find a better-paying job or move somewhere cheaper. The gallery insurance was tied up in legal battles, with her ex-manager claiming rights to the settlement. Some days she wondered if burning it all down had been worth it. But as Maya glanced at the simple sketch she'd made that afternoon, something shifted inside her. For the first time since she arrived, she walked to the small room she'd avoided using. Pulling the sheet off the window, she let moonlight spill across the empty space. This could be a studio again. Not the high-ceiling, perfectly lit space she'd had in the city, but maybe something more honest. In the far corner sat the only art supplies she'd brought, a wooden box containing basic brushes and a few tubes of paint. Maya didn't open it yet, that was a step for another day. But she did place her sketchbook on the windowsill where morning light would find it. The locals probably thought she was running from something. They weren't wrong. But standing in the empty room with salt air coming through the open window, Maya realized she might also be running towards something. She just couldn't see the full picture yet. The sky turned an angry shade of gray as Maya walked home from her shift at the cafe. What had started as light drizzle was quickly becoming something more serious. Locals had been talking about the coming storm for days, but Maya hadn't expected it to hit so suddenly. Wind whipped her hair across her face as she hurried along the coastal road. The normally peaceful ocean was now a churning mass of dark waves that crashed against the rocks below. Maya pulled her thin jacket tighter, regretting her decision to walk instead of waiting for Sonny's offer of a ride. Lightning cracked across the sky, briefly illuminating the path ahead. In that flash, Maya spotted something that made her heart jump, headlights tilted at an odd angle just off the road about 50 yards ahead. A car had slid off the rain-slicked pavement and was teetering dangerously close to the edge of the cliff. "Hello," Maya shouted, running toward the vehicle. Rain pelted her face as she approached the sleek black car that had smashed into a guardrail. "Is anyone in there?" Through the driver's window, she could make out a figure slumped against the steering wheel. Fear shot through her as she tried the door handle and found it locked. "Hey, can you hear me?" She banged on the window, relief washing over her when the person inside stirred. The window lowered a few inches and a man's voice called out, "What happened?" "Your car went off the road," Maya explained, rain streaming down her face. "You need to get out. This whole section could give way if the rain keeps washing out the dirt underneath." After a moment of confusion, the man unlocked the doors. Maya pulled open the driver's side and reached in to help him. He was tall and well-dressed in what looked like an expensive suit, now stained with blood from a cut on his forehead. "Can you walk?" she asked, noticing how he winced when moving. "I think so," he said, his voice steady despite the situation. "Just give me a second." Maya glanced nervously at the edge of the cliff. The pounding rain was already causing small streams of mud to flow beneath the car's tires. "We don't have a second. This whole ledge could collapse." Something in her tone must have convinced him because he immediately began maneuvering out of the car. Once standing, he swayed slightly, and Maya slipped her shoulder under his arm for support. "My phone and laptop," he said, turning back toward the vehicle. "Leave them," Maya insisted, pulling him away. "Unless you want to join them at the bottom of the ocean." They had barely taken 10 steps when a sickening crack sounded behind them. Looking back, they watched as a chunk of the roadside gave way, taking the guardrail and the front half of the expensive car with it. The vehicle hung suspended for a brief moment before gravity claimed it entirely, sending it tumbling down the rocky slope toward the raging sea below. The stranger stayed in shocked silence, water streaming down his face. Maya tugged at his arm. "My cottage is just up ahead. You need to get that cup looked at." The walk to Maya's place took twice as long as normal with the injured man leaning against her. By the time they reached her porch, they were both soaked to the bone and shivering. "I'm Maya, by the way," she said as she fumbled with the key. "Lucas," he replied, his teeth chattering. "Lucas Reed." Inside, Maya quickly grabbed towels and her first aid kit. Lucas sat at her small kitchen table, looking oddly out of place in her humble cottage. His expensive watch caught the light as he pressed a towel to his forehead. "You should probably go to the hospital," Maya said, examining the cut. "But the nearest one is 30 miles away, and in this storm." "This is fine," Lucas assured her. "I've had worse shaving." Despite his attempted humor, Maya noticed the slight tremor in his hands. Shock, probably. She put on a kettle for tea and found her cleanest sweatpants and oversized t-shirt for him to change into. "The bathroom's through there," she said, handing him the clothes. "These will be too small, but they're dry." While Lucas changed, Maya looked around her cottage with new eyes. The leaky ceiling, the mismatched furniture from the thrift store, the single lamp with its crooked shade, her temporary life suddenly felt embarrassingly sparse. When Lucas returned, the two small clothes make him look less intimidating, almost ordinary. Maya handed him a mug of tea. "It's not fancy, just black tea with honey." Perfect, he said, wrapping his hands around the warm mug. And thank you for pulling me out of that car. The storm howled outside, rattling the windows. The electricity flickered once, twice, and then went out completely, leaving them in darkness except for the glow of Maya's emergency candles. Looks like you're stuck here for a while, Maya said, lighting another candle. The power usually comes back pretty quick, but the road might be washed out in places. In the candlelight, Lucas looked around the small living room. His eyes stopped on Maya's sketchbook, which lay open on the coffee table. Are these yours? He asked, gesturing to the drawings. Maya felt a familiar flash of panic at having her work seen. Just some sketches, nothing special. Lucas picked up the book and turned a page. They're really good. You captured the ocean in a way I've never seen before. Something in his voice, a genuine appreciation without the calculating assessment she was used to from gallery owners, made Maya relax slightly. I'm an artist. Or I was, she admitted. These days I mostly just serve coffee and sketch for myself. Lucas looked up, his eyes meeting hers across the candlelit room. Why did you stop? No one in Pine Harbor had asked her that directly. They'd all been too polite or disinterested. Maya was surprised to find herself wanting to answer truthfully. Because sometimes you have to lose everything to figure out what actually matters, she said quietly. Lucas nodded slowly, a look of unexpected understanding crossing his face. I know exactly what you mean. 2 weeks had passed since the storm, and Maya had almost convinced herself that the strange night with Lucas Reed had been a dream. But the mug he'd used still sat on her shelf, washed and waiting for an owner who might never return. The morning after the storm, a tow truck and a sleek black SUV had arrived to deal with what remained of his wrecked car. Lucas had thanked her again, returned her 2 small clothes, now professionally cleaned, and disappeared back to whatever world billionaires lived in. Order up, Sonny called, sliding a plate of pancakes across the counter. Table 5. Maya grabbed the plate and weaved through the busy morning crowd. The Sun and Moon Cafe was packed with locals and a handful of early-season tourists. As she set down the pancakes, she noticed someone new sitting alone in the corner booth, the one with the best view of the harbor. Her heart skipped when she recognized Lucas. He was dressed more casually than before, in a simple gray sweater rather than a suit, but still somehow looked out of place among the fishermen and shop owners. Haven't seen you in a while, she said when she approached his table. Coffee? Lucas looked up from his phone and smiled. Maya, I was hoping I'd find you here. Where else would I be? She replied, pouring coffee into his mug. The cafe is pretty much my only social spot these days. Lucas took a sip of coffee and looked around. Is there somewhere we could talk privately? I have a business proposition for you. Maya raised an eyebrow. I'm working until 2. After that, I usually walk on the beach near my cottage. The beach at 3, then, Lucas said with a nod. For the rest of her shift, Maya found herself watching the clock. What kind of business proposition could a tech billionaire possibly have for her? She'd Googled Lucas after the storm and discovered he was much more than just some rich guy. Lucas Reed was the founder of NeuroSync, a company that had revolutionized how computers processed information. The articles described him as intensely private and rarely seen in public. At exactly 3, Maya spotted Lucas waiting on the beach. He was skipping stones across the unusually calm water, each one bouncing 5 or 6 times before sinking. Impressive, Maya said as she approached. I can never get past 3 skips. Lucas turned. It's all in the wrist. My grandfather taught me. He picked up another flat stone and handed it to her. Try holding it like this. For a few minutes, they just skipped stones and talked about nothing important. Maya found herself relaxing, almost forgetting why they were meeting in the first place. Finally, Lucas stopped and faced her. I wasn't entirely honest about why I was driving along this road during the storm. I was actually looking for property. Property? Here? Maya asked, surprised. My foundation is building a new headquarters, and I want something away from cities. Somewhere beautiful, Lucas explained. I found the perfect spot about 10 miles up the coast. Construction begins next month. Maya felt an unexpected twinge of disappointment. Rich people were always buying up coastal land and building massive houses that sat empty most of the year. She'd seen it happen in artist communities before. "That's nice," she said flatly. "But what does that have to do with me?" Lucas smiled, as if he'd been waiting for exactly that question. "The building needs art. Not corporate art, real art that captures this place. I've been to every gallery within 100 miles looking for the right artist." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, showing her a photo of her own sketch, the one he'd seen by candlelight. "But I think I already found her." Maya stared at him. "I don't understand." "I want to commission you to create a series of paintings for the foundation. Large-scale works that show the coastline through the seasons. The kind of art that makes people stop and really see a place." "I don't paint anymore," Maya said automatically. "I just sketch sometimes." "But you could paint again," Lucas pressed. "The way you capture light and texture even in black and white, imagine what you could do with color." Maya looked out at the ocean, her heart racing. "You don't even know my work. One sketchbook isn't enough to judge." "I might have done some research," Lucas admitted. "Maya Chen, right? You had a show at the Brennan Gallery in New York last year." Her blood went cold. That was a different person. "People change, I get that," Lucas said quietly. "But talent doesn't just disappear." They walked in silence for a while, the sound of waves filling the space between them. Maya could feel possibilities opening up, and with them, old fears rushing back. The pressure, the expectations, the crushing anxiety that had nearly destroyed her. "I can't go back to that world," she finally said. "I'm not asking you to," Lucas replied. "This would be just between us. No galleries, no critics, no openings. Just you, painting what you see." Before Maya could respond, a group of locals walked past. One of them, an older man named Tom who ran the hardware store, nodded politely but gave Lucas a suspicious look. "People are talking about you," Maya said once they were alone again. "Word travels fast in small towns." "What are they saying?" Lucas asked. "That you're buying up land. That your company plans to change the whole coastline." Maya shrugged. "Some people are worried." Lucas frowned. "It's just one building meant to blend into the landscape. We're even preserving the old lighthouse on the property." "It's not about the building," Maya explained. "It's about what comes after. Rich people move in, prices go up, locals get pushed out. I've seen it happen." Lucas stopped walking and turned to face her. "Is that what you think I'm doing?" "I don't know what you're doing," Maya answered honestly. "I barely know you." The sun was starting to sink lower, casting long shadows across the sand. Lucas looked at his watch. "I need to get back for a video conference, but before I go..." He handed her a business card with a handwritten number on the back. "The commission offer is real. Think about it. The fee would be $200,000. Maya almost dropped the card. "That's insane." "That's market rate for what I'm asking," Lucas replied. 6 major pieces over the course of a year." "I don't even have a studio," Maya said weakly. "That can be arranged." Lucas smiled. "Just think about it. Call me within a week if you're interested." As she watched him walk away, Maya noticed several locals staring from the nearby pier. Tom and his friend Hal were talking in low voices, occasionally glancing her way. That evening, Maya sat on her porch with a cup of tea, Lucas's card in her hand. $200,000 would solve every financial problem she had. She could stay in Pine Harbor indefinitely, maybe even buy a small place of her own. But the thought of painting again, real painting, not just sketching, made her hands tremble. The last time she'd stood before a blank canvas, everything had spiraled out of control so quickly. The pressure, the demands, the feeling of being trapped in someone else's vision of who she should be. Maya pulled out her sketchbook and flipped through recent pages. The cliffs, the lighthouse, the old fishing boats in the harbor, she'd captured them all with a freedom she hadn't felt in years. Would accepting Lucas's money take that away? She picked up a pencil and began to sketch again, trying to work through her thoughts on paper. Almost without realizing it, she found herself drawing Lucas as he had looked on the beach, not as the powerful billionaire from the news articles, but as the man who skipped stones and talked about his grandfather. Behind her open door, the wooden box of paints she brought from New York sat untouched. Maya glanced at it, feeling something stir inside her that she'd tried hard to bury. Not ambition exactly, but something simpler. the desire to create something beautiful. She set down her sketchbook and reached for her phone. The studio Lucas arranged for Maya wasn't just a room with good light. It was a dream come true. An old boathouse converted into a workspace with floor-to-ceiling windows that captured the ocean from sunrise to sunset. The first time she stepped inside, Maya had to remind herself to breathe. "So, what do you think?" Lucas asked, standing in the doorway as Maya walked the length of the polished wooden floor. "It's perfect," she whispered, almost afraid to speak too loudly and break the spell. Empty easels waited along one wall. A table held neat rows of paints, brushes, and canvases, all top quality, all brand new. "I wasn't sure what supplies you preferred, so I got a variety," Lucas explained, watching her carefully. Maya ran her fingers over a set of brushes with handcrafted wooden handles. These must have cost a fortune. "Good tools matter," Lucas said simply. "There's an apartment upstairs if you want to stay overnight sometimes. The light at dawn is supposed to be incredible." Maya turned to face him, suddenly overwhelmed. "Why are you doing all this? The commission fee was already generous. This is excessive." Lucas looked out at the ocean for a long moment before answering. "When I was building my company, I worked 20 hours a day in a windowless office. I was so focused on success that I forgot to actually live. Now I have more money than I could ever spend, but I've lost the ability to see beauty in ordinary things." He turned back to her. "Your sketches reminded me what that feels like." There was something raw and honest in his voice that made Maya's chest tighten. She wasn't used to people saying exactly what they felt without calculation. "I'll do my best," she promised. "That's all I'm asking," Lucas replied with a smile. "I have meetings for the next 2 weeks, but I'll check in when I get back. The foundation people might call with paperwork questions." After he left, Maya stood alone in the vast space, feeling both excited and terrified. She hadn't touched oils in months. What if she couldn't do it anymore? What if whatever spark had made her work special was gone forever? Her first attempts were disappointing. The strokes felt stiff, the colors flat. Maya wiped away 3 days of work with a rag soaked in turpentine, fighting back tears of frustration. That night, she lay awake in the apartment above the studio, listening to waves crash against the shore and wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. The next morning, instead of forcing herself to paint, Maya grabbed her sketchbook and walked along the beach at low tide. She collected shells, watched seabirds dive for fish, and let her mind wander. By late afternoon, she'd filled 10 pages with loose, flowing sketches of whatever caught her eye. Something shifted after that day. Maya stopped thinking about the commission as a job and started seeing it as a conversation with the landscape, with herself, with the person she used to be. The paintings began to take shape, not as perfect reproductions of the coastline, but as emotional responses to its moods and mysteries. 3 weeks into the project, Maya had completed 1 large canvas and started 2 others. She'd fallen into a rhythm, losing track of time as she worked. Some days she painted until her arms ached. Other days she just sat watching the changing light, thinking about color and form. The chime of her phone broke her concentration one afternoon. A text from Lucas. "Just landed. Can I see what you've been working on? No pressure." Maya looked at her paint-splattered clothes and the mess of supplies scattered around the studio. Part of her wanted to clean up and maybe even change before he arrived, but another part, the more honest part, just texted back, "Doors open." When Lucas arrived an hour later, Maya was still working, adding final touches to a section of stormy waves. She heard his footsteps pause at the doorway. "This isn't what I expected," he said quietly. Maya turned, brush in hand, suddenly unsure. "Is that good or bad?" Lucas walked slowly around the large canvas, studying it from different angles. The painting showed the coastline during a storm, but with unexpected colors hiding in the darkness, purples and golds that created an almost otherworldly glow. "It's better," he finally said. "Much better. I thought you'd paint something safe, pretty landscapes for office walls. This has real feeling in it." Relief washed over Maya. "I tried doing straightforward scenes at first, but they felt empty. So I started painting what this place feels like, not just what it looks like." Lucas nodded, still looking at the canvas. "That's exactly what I wanted, even if I didn't know how to ask for it." They ordered takeout from the local seafood place and ate it sitting on the floor of the studio, talking about art and technology and how both tried to make sense of the world in different ways. As evening fell, Lucas helped Maya clean brushes, listening as she explained why she preferred certain pigments and techniques. "You never mentioned what happened in New York," Lucas said as they stood side by side at the sink. "I looked up your old gallery, but it closed after the fire." Maya's hands stilled under the running water. "It's not a happy story." "Most good stories aren't," Lucas replied gently. Standing there with soapy water up to her wrists, Maya found herself telling him things she hadn't told anyone in Pine Harbor about the controlling gallery owner who had micromanaged every aspect of her career, about the endless parties where she felt like a product being sold rather than an artist, about the night she'd reached her breaking point. "I didn't set the fire," she clarified. "But I was there late working, and when it started, I just watched for a while before calling 911. Part of me was glad to see it all go up in flames." Lucas was quiet for a long moment. "Were you in love with him?" The gallery owner. "I thought I was," Maya admitted. "Now I think I was in love with the idea of being successful. He just seemed like the path to get there." After Lucas left that night, Maya stayed up late working on a new canvas, this one showing the lighthouse at dawn, with the first rays of sun turning the water to liquid gold. As she painted, she realized something had changed. For the first time since coming to Pine Harbor, she was thinking about the future rather than hiding from the past. The next few weeks fell into a pleasant pattern. Lucas would visit every few days, sometimes bringing food or coffee, sometimes just sitting quietly while she worked. They talked about their childhoods, his as the son of a physics professor, hers as the daughter of immigrant parents who had sacrificed everything to give her opportunities they never had. During one of these visits, Lucas mentioned that he'd started taking sailing lessons from an old fisherman in town. "I've lived near oceans my whole life, but never learned how they work," he explained. "I'm trying to change that." Maya smiled, recognizing his effort to connect with the local community. It seemed to be working. She'd heard fewer suspicious comments about him lately. One evening, as they watched the sunset from the studio balcony, Lucas pointed to a boat passing along the horizon. "That's my new project." A research vessel studying ocean plastics. The Foundation's first major initiative. "That's amazing," Maya said. "Is that why you chose this location?" "For the ocean research." Lucas turned to look at her, his expression suddenly serious. "Partly. But I think we both know there was another reason I kept coming back to Pine Harbor." The intensity in his eyes made Maya's heart race. She wasn't ready for this conversation, not when everything in her life was finally starting to make sense again. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a notification. A local news blog had tagged her in a post. The headline made her blood run cold. "New York Gallery Fire. The truth behind artist Maya Chen's fresh start." "I need to go," she said abruptly, gathering her things. "Maya, what's wrong?" Lucas asked, concern in his voice. But she was already heading for the door, the familiar feeling of panic rising in her chest. Everything she'd built here was about to come crashing down, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Maya's hands shook as she scrolled through the article on her phone. The small local news blog had somehow connected her to the gallery fire in New York, suggesting she'd fled the city under suspicious circumstances. While the piece didn't outright accuse her of anything illegal, the hints and questions left hanging created a damaging picture. Who would even care enough to dig this up? She whispered to herself, sitting on the edge of her bed in the cottage. She hadn't slept all night, watching her phone light up with notifications as people in town shared the story. A knock on her door made her jump. Maya considered pretending she wasn't home, but when the knocking continued, she reluctantly went to answer it. Sunny stood on her porch, 2 coffee cups in hand. "Thought you might need this," she said, offering one to Maya. "You saw the article," Maya said. It wasn't a question. "Everyone's seen it by now," Sunny confirmed, following Maya inside. "Small towns. News travels faster than internet service." Maya sank onto her worn couch, cradling the coffee cup. "I didn't set the fire. I need you to know that." "Never thought you did," Sunny said, sitting beside her. "But something happened in New York that sent you running here. I've recognized that look since the day you walked into my cafe. It's the same look I had when I left Chicago 20 years ago. For the first time since arriving in Pine Harbor, Maya found herself telling someone the full story about the controlling relationship with her former gallery owner and lover, Vince, who had slowly taken over every aspect of her career and personal life. He decided what I painted when I painted who I talked to at showings, Maya explained. He even picked out my clothes. And I reckon because it was working, my career was taking off, the money was rolling in, but I was completely lost. Men like that are good at making you think you need them, Sonny said quietly. Maya nodded. The night of the fire, we had a huge fight. He'd sold a series of my paintings that I wanted to keep, ones I'd made about my parents. I told him I was done, that I was leaving. He got so angry. I'd never seen him like that before. She took a deep breath before continuing. I left him in the office and went to the storage room to collect my personal things. While I was back there, I heard glass breaking. Then I smelled smoke. When I came out, there were flames everywhere, and Vince was gone. I called 911, but it was too late to save much. And you think he started it? Sonny asked. I don't know for sure. The fire investigator said it was faulty wiring, but the timing. Maya trailed off. Either way, I took it as a sign to get out. I withdrew my savings and just started driving. When I found Pine Harbor, it felt like somewhere I could disappear. Sonny squeezed her hand. Well, that plan's shut now. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. Just saw the article. Are you okay? Can we talk? She set the phone down without responding. I need to figure this out on my own. Good luck with that, Sonny said, heading for the door. Half the town is already taking sides. Most people are on yours, by the way. Tom at the hardware store has been telling everyone he never trusted that city article anyway. After Sonny left, Maya tried to work in her sketchbook, but her mind kept racing. Around noon, she decided to go to the studio. At least there she could lose herself in her painting. She needed the comfort of creation now more than ever. The studio was quiet and filled with afternoon light when she arrived. Maya mixed her paints with mechanical precision, trying to settle her thoughts. She was so focused on her task that she didn't hear the door open behind her. Still favoring those cheap student brushes, I see. Some things never change. Maya froze at the sound of that voice. She turned slowly to find Vince standing in her studio doorway, looking exactly as she remembered. Expensive suit, perfectly styled hair, cold smile that never reached his eyes. How did you find me? She asked, instinctively backing away. You're not exactly hiding, Maya. Your billionaire boyfriend has been showing your work to his fancy friends. A collector sent me photos last week. Vince walked into the studio, inspecting her paintings with a critical eye. Not your best work, but there's something raw here. I could sell these. Get out, Maya said, her voice stronger than she felt. You have no right to be here. Vince laughed. No right? I made you. Every technique you're using, I taught you. Every connection you ever had came through me. You controlled me, Maya corrected. There's a difference. And yet here you are, letting another rich man set you up in a pretty cage. He gestured around the studio. At least I was honest about our arrangement. Maya felt anger rising in her chest. What do you want, Vince? He smiled his business smile, the one she'd once found charming. I want what's mine. 30% of whatever this Lucas Reed is paying you for starters, and an introduction to his circle of tech billionaires who buy art to prove they have souls. That's not going to happen, Maya said firmly. No. Vince raised an eyebrow. What would the fine people of this quaint little town think if they knew the truth about that night? About all the nights before it? Maya felt her confidence waver. What truth? That you threatened to burn down the gallery yourself multiple times. That witnesses heard you screaming about destroying everything. That you were the last person seen in the building before the fire started. Vince stepped closer. Your word against mine, sweetheart. Who do you think people will believe? The respected gallery owner or the volatile artist with a history of emotional problems? Maya's phone buzzed again in her pocket. Another text from Lucas. She ignored it. You have until tomorrow to think about it, Vince said, heading for the door. I'm staying at that charming inn in town. Call me when you're ready to be reasonable. After he left, Maya sank to the floor, her back against the wall. Everything she built here was suddenly at risk. her new start, the respect of the community, her work with Lucas. Even if people didn't believe Vince's lies, the drama and scandal would follow her, just like before. She picked up her phone to find 3 missed calls and several texts from Lucas. The latest one read, "Meeting with town council tonight about the foundation project. Could use your support. People trust you here." Maya laughed bitterly at the irony. Lucas thought she had influence with the locals, while in reality, she might soon be the most hated person in Pine Harbor. That evening, instead of going to the town meeting, Maya sat on the beach watching the waves. She'd always found comfort in the ocean's constant motion, the way it could be completely transformed by a storm, yet remain essentially itself. "Thought I might find you here," a voice said behind her. Maya turned to see Lucas walking across the sand. He sat down beside her without waiting for an invitation. "You missed the meeting," he said, not unkindly. "I saw the article," Maya replied. "Didn't think my presence would help your case." Lucas was quiet for a moment. "Is it true? What they're saying about the fire?" "Which part?" Maya asked. "That I was there when it happened?" "Yes." "That I said it?" "No." "I never thought you did," Lucas said simply. They sat in silence watching the sunset paint the water gold and crimson. Finally, Maya spoke again. "My ex-manager is in town. The gallery owner from New York. He wants money and connections to your wealthy friends." Lucas's expression hardened. "And if you don't help him, he'll make sure everyone believes I started the fire." Maya drew patterns in the sand with her finger. "He's good at twisting stories. It's what he does best." "We can fight this," Lucas said firmly. "I have lawyers." "It's not about legal truth," Maya interrupted. "It's about perception. Once people see you a certain way, it sticks. I know that better than anyone." Lucas turned to face her directly. "Do you know what happened at the meeting tonight? The town voted to support the foundation project. Not because of me. I'm still the suspicious outsider with too much money. They voted yes because Tom and Sonny and a dozen others stood up and talked about how your presence here has changed things. How your art classes for the kids at the community center matter. How you belong here now." Maya felt tears threatening. "And when they hear Vince's version of me?" "They'll trust what they've seen with their own eyes," Lucas said, taking her hand. "I know I do." Their eyes met, and Maya felt something shift between them, something deeper than attraction or friendship. Lucas Reed, a man who could have anything or anyone in the world, was looking at her like she was the only thing that mattered. Before she could respond, her phone rang. The number was unknown, but Maya had a sinking feeling she knew who it was. "I have to deal with this," she said, standing up. "On my own." Lucas looked like he wanted to argue, but instead just nodded. "Whatever you decide, I'm here. Just don't disappear. Please." As Maya walked away along the darkening beach, she felt torn between running again and standing her ground. Facing Vince meant facing her own mistakes, the compromises she'd made, the control she'd surrendered, the person she'd allowed herself to become. But running would mean leaving behind everything good she'd found in Pine Harbor, her art, the community, and now Lucas, whose quiet support offered something she'd never experienced before: freedom to be herself. Back at her cottage, Maya opened the wooden box she'd brought from New York. Beneath her paints and brushes lay a folder of legal documents and a USB drive. She'd kept them as insurance, never really believing she'd need them. "Time to stop hiding," she whispered to herself as she plugged the drive into her laptop. Morning light filtered through Maya's cottage windows as she reviewed the contents of the USB drive one more time. What she had wasn't just insurance, it was a record of years of manipulation and control. Emails where Vince had threatened artists who wanted to leave his gallery. Financial documents showing how he'd skimmed money from sales. Photos of artwork he'd sold without permission, including her parents' series. Maya took a deep breath and dialed Vince's number. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't call," he answered smugly. "We need to talk," Maya said, keeping her voice steady. "Not at your hotel. Meet me at the lighthouse point in an hour." "Why there?" Vince asked, suspicion evident in his tone. "Because it's public enough that you can't make a scene, but private enough for us to talk honestly," Maya replied. 1 hour. She hung up before he could argue. Next, she called Lucas but got his voicemail. "It's Maya. I'm meeting Vince at the lighthouse point at 10. I'm handling this my way, but I wanted you to know where I am. The path to the lighthouse was steep and winding, with the ocean visible on both sides of the narrow peninsula. Maya arrived early and sat on a bench facing the water, the USB drive secure in her pocket along with a small digital recorder. The old lighthouse stood tall behind her, its white paint peeling from years of salt and wind. She heard Vince's footsteps before she saw him, the distinctive sound of expensive shoes on the gravel path. "This better be worth the hike," he said, brushing invisible dust from his sleeve. "These shoes weren't made for nature walks." Maya didn't stand. "You always cared more about appearances than substance." Vince laughed. "Says the woman who's been hiding in this backwater for months. Have you made your decision?" "Yes," Maya said calmly. "I'm not giving you money, and I'm not introducing you to Lucas or his friends." Vince's smile faded. "Then I guess our conversation is over. I'll be speaking with the local paper this afternoon. I'm sure they'll be fascinated by what really happened that night in New York." "You mean the night you set fire to your own gallery for the insurance money?" Maya asked quietly. Vince went very still. "Careful, Maya, that's a serious accusation." "It's not an accusation, it's a fact." Maya pulled out her phone and played a video, security footage from the gallery showing Vince knocking over an easel onto an electric heater, then quickly exiting through the back door. "The fire investigator missed this because you deleted the security footage. But you forgot about the cloud backup." Vince's face drained of color. "Where did you get that?" "I've always been more tech-savvy than you gave me credit for," Maya said. "I set up those security cameras myself, remember? After the break-in last year, you gave me the login and I never deleted it." She stood up, finally feeling on equal footing. "I have more. Financial records showing how you've been cheating artists for years. Emails threatening other painters who wanted to leave. Even the real sale records for my parents' series, which you told me sold for half what you actually got." "What do you want?" Vince asked, his voice no longer smooth and confident. "I want you to leave Pine Harbor today and never contact me again," Maya said firmly. "I want you to stop spreading lies about me. And I want a public statement clearing my name regarding the fire." Vince laughed bitterly. "You think it's that simple? You can't prove I started the fire intentionally. It could have been an accident." "Maybe," Maya conceded. "But combined with the financial fraud, it's enough to destroy your reputation and possibly send you to jail. Are you willing to risk that?" They stared at each other, the wind whipping around them, waves crashing on the rocks below. Maya saw something she'd never seen in Vince's eyes before: fear. "You wouldn't really expose all this," he said finally. "It would hurt your career too. No gallery would touch you if they knew you were involved in something like this." "I don't need galleries anymore," Maya replied. "I found another way to make art that matters to me. You have no power over me now." The sound of footsteps on the path made them both turn. Lucas was walking toward them, his expression serious. "Everything okay here?" he asked, coming to stand beside Maya. "Perfect timing," Maya said. "Vince was just leaving town. Weren't you, Vince?" Vince looked between them, calculating his options. Finally, he straightened his jacket. "This isn't over, Maya." "Yes, it is," Lucas said calmly. "Unless you want me to make sure every gallery owner and art collector in the country knows what you've been up to." "You're making a mistake," Vince told Maya. "He'll use you just like I did. Rich men always want something. The difference," Maya said, "is that I know who I am now. And what I'm worth." They watched as Vince walked back down the path, his expensive shoes slipping occasionally on the loose gravel. "I got your message," Lucas said when Vince was out of earshot. "I came as fast as I could." "I had it under control," Maya told him, feeling a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. "I know you did," Lucas replied. "I just wanted to be here, in case." 6 months later, the old boathouse studio was almost unrecognizable. What had once been Maya's private workspace was now the heart of Pine Harbor's community arts program. Children's paintings hung alongside professional work, and the once empty space buzzed with creative energy most days of the week. Maya stood in the center of the room, directing volunteers who were hanging artwork for tomorrow's exhibition. "That one needs to be higher," she called to Tom, who was balancing on a ladder with a large seascape. "We want people to look up at the horizon, not down." "You're getting bossy in your old age," Tom grumbled good-naturedly as he adjusted the frame. "I prefer particular," Maya replied with a smile. The door swung open, bringing a gust of autumn air and the sound of hammering from outside. Lucas walked in, his normally perfect hair tousled by the wind and a smudge of dirt on his cheek. "The outdoor installation is almost finished," he reported. "The high school kids are just securing the last pieces." Maya couldn't help but smile at his appearance. In the months since their confrontation with Vince, Lucas had gradually shed his polished billionaire image. Today he wore worn jeans and a simple sweater, looking more like a local handyman than the CEO of a tech empire. "You've got a little something," Maya gestured to her own cheek. Lucas rubbed at his face, missing the dirt entirely. With a laugh, Maya stepped closer and wiped it away with her thumb. "Better," she said softly. Their eyes met, and for a moment, everyone else in the busy room seemed to fade away. 6 months of slowly building trust had created something between them that neither had expected, something real and grounded that had nothing to do with art commissions or business deals. "You two are making me sick," Sunny called from across the room where she was arranging refreshments for tomorrow's opening. "Some of us are trying to work here." Maya stepped back, feeling her cheeks flush. "Speaking of work, how's the foundation headquarters coming along?" she asked Lucas. "Ahead of schedule, actually. The town council approved the revised plans last week." The original design for the NeuroSync Foundation had been completely reimagined after Lucas made the decision to put most of his Pine Harbor land holdings into a community trust. Instead of an isolated research facility, the new plans integrated the foundation with the town itself, creating jobs, educational opportunities, and public spaces that would benefit everyone. "Liam's mom stopped me at the grocery store," Maya said, mentioning the young boy who had first watched her sketch by the ocean. "She said he's applying for one of the student internships at the Marine Research Lab. Apparently, he hasn't stopped talking about ocean conservation since your presentation at the school." Lucas's face lit up. He's exactly the kind of kid we're hoping to reach. Smart, curious, already connected to this place. A volunteer called Maya's name from across the room, needing help with the lighting for a sculpture display. For the next few hours, she was too busy to think about anything except preparing for the exhibition. This show was different from any she'd been part of before, a true community effort with works from professional artists displayed alongside pieces created by local residents of all ages. As evening approached and the volunteers began to leave, Maya found herself alone in the space, making final adjustments to her own contribution to the show, a series of 7 large canvases that told the story of destruction and rebirth. The paintings traced a journey from darkness to light, ending with an image of the Pine Harbor coastline at dawn, filled with hope and possibility. "They're extraordinary," Lucas said quietly from behind her. Maya turned to find him watching her with an expression that still made her heart beat faster after all these months. "Thank you for giving me the space to create them," she replied. "I think you would have found your way back to painting with or without me," Lucas said, coming to stand beside her. "You're too talented not to." Maya considered this, maybe, but it might have taken longer. And it wouldn't have led here. She gestured around the transformed boathouse. Outside, the sun was setting over the harbor, painting the water with streaks of gold and crimson. Maya and Lucas walked to the small deck that extended over the water, leaning against the railing side by side. "I got an email from the New York Times today," Maya said after a moment of comfortable silence. "They want to do a feature on the community arts program. Apparently, what we're doing here is becoming a model for other small towns." "Are you going to do it?" Lucas asked. Maya nodded. "I think so. It's not about me. It's about what we've created together. All of us." Lucas smiled. "A long way from hiding out in your cottage, afraid someone might recognize you. A long way from you crashing your fancy car into the ocean too," Maya teased. They laughed together, the sound carrying across the water. Behind them, the boathouse glowed with warm light, each window framing the artwork waiting to be revealed tomorrow. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you," Lucas said, suddenly serious. "The foundation board is expanding, and we need someone to lead the arts integration program. Someone who understands both the creative process and community engagement." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Are you offering me a job?" I'm offering you a partnership, Lucas clarified. Equal say, equal vision. Your name beside mine on the foundation documents. I don't know, Maya said hesitantly. Working together when we're also, whatever we are, that could get complicated. Lucas turned to face her fully. Everything worthwhile is complicated. That's what makes it interesting. Maya thought about how much had changed in a year. She'd arrived in Pine Harbor broken and afraid, running from her past. Now she was building something new, both in her art and in her life. I'll think about it, she promised. The next morning, Maya woke early, too excited about the exhibition to sleep. She slipped out of bed quietly, leaving Lucas still sleeping, and drove to the boathouse to check everything one last time before the doors opened to the public. To her surprise, she wasn't the first one there. Sunny was already arranging fresh flowers, and Tom was making slight adjustments to the lighting. Couldn't sleep either, Maya asked them. Too nervous, Sunny admitted. Half the town is coming today, plus those fancy art people from the city Lucas invited. By noon, the boathouse was packed with visitors, locals mingling with art collectors, critics, and foundation donors. Maya moved through the crowd, stopping to explain different aspects of the community program and introduce the young artists whose work was being showcased alongside more established names. She was in the middle of describing a collaborative project created by the Senior Center Art Group when she noticed a hush fall over one section of the room. Maya turned to see Lucas standing on a small platform, microphone in hand. I want to thank everyone for coming today, he began. What you're seeing here is more than just an art exhibition. It's proof that when a community comes together around a shared vision, extraordinary things can happen. He gestured to the artwork surrounding them. 6 months ago, this building was just an empty boathouse. Today, it's the heart of something special, a place where creativity isn't just for artists, but for everyone who wants to express their connection to this place. Lucas's eyes found Maya in the crowd. None of this would have been possible without Maya Chen. She taught us that art isn't just about hanging paintings on walls, it's about building bridges between people. Maya felt her cheeks flush as applause filled the room. Lucas continued, announcing the Foundation's commitment to funding the community arts program for the next 5 years. He outlined plans for scholarships, residencies for visiting artists, and expanded facilities. As the crowd broke into excited conversation, Maya slipped outside to catch her breath. The autumn air was cool against her skin as she looked out at the harbor, where fishing boats bobbed alongside weekend sailors. Too much attention? Lucas asked, joining her on the deck. Maya smiled. Just needed a moment. It's overwhelming to see it all come together like this. Lucas leaned against the railing beside her. I have something for you. An opening gift. He handed her a small wooden box. Inside was an old-fashioned key. What's this for? Maya asked. A cottage, Lucas replied. About a mile down the coast. It's nothing fancy, just a simple place with good light and a view of the water. A place that could be yours, completely. No strings attached. Maya looked up at him, confused. I don't understand. You've been living in my guest house for 3 months, Lucas explained. And while I love having you there, I want you to have your own space that isn't connected to me or the foundation. Somewhere that's just yours, where you can go when you need to be alone with your art. Maya felt tears threatening. No one had ever understood her need for independence so completely. The cottage is yours whether you take the foundation job or not, Lucas continued. Whether we stay together or not. I never want you to feel trapped or dependent, not on me, not on anyone. Maya closed her fingers around the key, deeply moved by the gesture. Thank you. They stood together watching the water, shoulders touching lightly. Behind them, the sounds of the exhibition, laughter, conversation, music, spilled out onto the deck. So, Lucas said after a moment, your work is being celebrated. The community program is thriving. You have your own place. What's next for Maya Chen? Maya thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment, from success to despair to a different kind of fulfillment that felt more genuine than anything she'd experienced in New York. I think I'm ready to say yes, she answered. To the foundation job? Lucas asked. Maya turned to face him. To that? To the cottage. To seeing where this goes. She gestured between them. To stopping life on hold and actually living it. Lucas's smile was like sunrise breaking over the harbor. That sounds like an excellent plan. Inside the boathouse, someone called their names, reminding them that they were hosting an event currently in full swing. We should get back, Maya said reluctantly. As they turned to head inside, Lucas took her hand. By the way, I forgot to mention, a reporter asked me what to call all this. He gestured to the boathouse and the harbor beyond. The program, the foundation work, everything we're building here. What did you tell them? Maya asked. I called it a redefinition, Lucas said. A new way of thinking about success, community, and what matters. Maya smiled, squeezing his hand as they walked back toward the light and noise of the celebration. Redefinition, she repeated. I like that. Back inside, surrounded by art and friends and possibility, Maya realized she had finally found what she'd been searching for since leaving New York, not just a place to hide, but a place to grow. Not just a patron, but a partner. Not just a second chance, but a completely new definition of what her life could be.